Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Classical Drunks. My name's Aaron. I'm here with Emmanuel. Say hi, Manny.
Hey, Slancha.
Slancha. We're drinking some lovely Coronas. With lime and everything.
Don't say it. Now I'm gonna lose all my hipster credentials.
Oh my god, you're such a filthy hipster.
I know.
Look, Corona is a delightful drink, and it was sunny today, so we have an excuse to drink it.
Yes.
So yeah, right today.
Just the fact that we said that it was sunny, I'm sure that'll be enough for people to guess what day we recorded.
Yeah, the one of the 3 days a year in Ireland where we actually have sun. Today we're going to be talking about immigration, them filthy immigrants. Oh shit! I was racist again. Damn it! No. I mean those lovely immigrants. I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're tolerant and accepting.
We are tolerant and accepting.
And blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Actually, no, Manny himself is an immigrant. So
What?
What? Yes.
What?
I know.
I'm not Irish?
No, well, I know. We do say honorary, but, you know, officially...
Are you saying I'm adopted?
Adopted Irish. Yeah. But officially...
Well, that explains a few things now.
Still a filthy immigrant.
Like the 20 plus years I remember spending in France. Oh, it all makes sense. Right. So immigration.
Yeah, immigration.
Just a little bit of a spoiler alert. Immigration is a massive topic.
Huge.
And we will spend a few podcasts on that topic. So before you go in the comments and start saying, well, what about the refugees? What about, Muslims? We're going to be talking about a bit more specifically, we're going to only talk about immigration and how it relates to economics in a lot of aspects. So please don't go in the comments and say, what about X? We will probably mention it later. So if you feel we've missed an aspect that's purely economical, okay, but fine. But if you say, what about whatever it is, we're not going to talk about refugees essentially because that's not going to be today's podcast. Later, we will
definitely cover refugees.
Oh,
at
absolutely,
some point.
yes. But it's again, it's something that we could do many top podcasts on overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
first on, what about majorbs?
Oh, the jobs. Yes,
the jobs.
Okay, so generally, what we hear from the right, and even a little bit from the left sometimes, very sparsely, that immigrants are stealing our jobs.
Yes.
Well, we had, what was it? We had UKIP, which was basically in the UK a huge chunk of people saying the immigrants are stealing our jobs. That's basically what UKIP ran on.
That was one of the major aspects. So a bit same with Trump.
Yeah.
According to because numerous polls were run in America, and the three main concerns that distinguished Hillary supporters from Trump supporters were terrorism, political correctness, and immigration.
Mm-hmm. And the same with Bernie Sanders. Even himself, he said that he didn't want huge amounts of immigration to the US. He didn't want open borders because he thought that was a right-wing conspiracy to get cheap labor into the country and compete with low-wage workers. So yeah, even on the left we can see
very marginally. I'll give
marginally,
you that.
but still,
yes, before we get strawmanned or accused of strawmanning.
But generally, the left is actually very, very correct in this. They're very pro-immigration, so they're actually very correct in this case.
Yes and no. So that's probably what we'll talk about in future episodes. Maybe to an extent that's unhealthy.
Yeah,
yes.
Maybe. So,
but generally speaking, yes, between a side that wants no immigration at all and a side that goes a little bit too far, a little bit too much freedom is probably the least of two evil compared to no freedom at all.
Yeah. So jobs. So how many jobs have you stolen since you've arrived here in Ireland?
I lost counting. So yeah, so that's probably the main criticism, or really what just keeps coming back, and which is a funny idea, because when you say that immigrants steal jobs, first of all, there's the idea that jobs is a zero-sum game, that there's a finite number of jobs, and you see that idea coming back and back again. So for example, in France, people would say we need to reduce the number of the weekly, the number of hours that you work in a week, because that means that if you have, then that'll create jobs, because jobs is a finite amount, so we need to share work. But it's a bit of a funny idea, because just if you step back for a second and if you think about it, young people enter the labor market every day.
Way more than immigrants.
Yeah, so, well, it depends on the country, obviously, but that's happening. Population is growing. Not as much as it used to be, granted, but if you think about the last half a century we've been through, it was a huge growth of the number of people across the board, everywhere. And the number of jobs hasn't remained static.
And the economy grew massively.
Yeah. and if you think of women, half a century ago, were not legally allowed to work in quite a few places.
That's a little bit less in Ireland, but yeah.
Yeah, even in Ireland.
We won't talk about that.
Yeah, so that's actually a good point, because, it's until...
there was actually a fun law here that women, once they got a job in the public sector, they had to give it up if they were married.
Wasn't it even broader? That I read that I was talking to someone, and I was told that it was even broader. So like, once you got married, you just could not work.
Yeah, and then they stopped that, and then up until about the 70s, if you worked in a public sector job as a woman, the day you got married, you had to quit your job.
Yes, that's Ireland for you. We have to do one day a podcast about the contrast. Ireland is a fascinating country politically, because of one of these things. We'll have to do a podcast.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
But it's yeah. But there's a bit of truth in the sense of, well, what about the women? Nobody's going around saying that women stole the jobs.
No.
That's just try picturing some crazy conservative saying that. The kind of reception, the kind of, how that would be received in the public eye. Hey, we should never have given the right to work for women. They stole men's jobs.
But yeah, so that's the thing. Like, people forget that when immigrants arrive, they also, yes, they work and they technically take a job or whatever out of the labor force, but they're also then contributing to the economy through their consumption.
They need to. Yeah.
They need to have housing, they need to have food, so they shop, and that then creates another job. So yes. it's the economy is circular in the end. So, you're just adding more productivity into the economy when you add more immigrants into the economy.
So
you're adding more production.
The common error is to think that the shift that's induced by immigration is only one way. So you say immigrants come in and they start working, so that means that other people will not be able to fulfill those jobs. But so that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is, as you were saying, they have an impact on the economy. So you cannot think of the labor market as in just one way, in a static way. You have to think in a more dynamic way when you say, well, okay, that's how the offer varies, but you also have to take into account how the demand is going to vary. So it works both ways. And the error I see a lot of people do is only consider one aspect and not the other.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think a lot of people do that. What I think they also do is they kind of think that immigrants kind of don't, work or whatever, but
there's the idea. It's funny
not that they don't work, but that there's, I don't know.
No, but that's true.
There's kind of this thing that, I don't know, there's, for some weird reason, there's a stereotype that immigrants are lazy and don't work. I don't know why this exists.
And they steal our jobs at the same time.
And they steal our jobs at the same time. It's kind of amazing.
So it's called Schrodinger's immigrant.
Schrodinger's immigrant. Yeah.
They manage to work and be lazy at the same time. So I'm like, okay, well, fine, we can talk about it, but let's pick one side, because it's kind of, I know, self-contradictory. But you cannot say that they're stealing jobs if they're not working. That kind of seems like self-contradictory to me.
Right. What else?
Yeah. No. One other aspect is we hear that somehow immigrants are depressing wages.
Yes.
So immigrants coming and now they're not. You're not going to be able to get such a good salary as you used to get before, which is a silly idea for a lot of reasons. I would say the first reason is you have to think in terms of division of labor. So the people who come in are not necessarily the same people as the people who are already here. Think about the immigrants. What do they look like in terms of degree or education?
What are their skills, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And think of the native population.
This is where you get into really fun things as well, like stereotypes.
Yeah. Well, it's not just stereotypes. It's actually, it's measurable.
It is, yeah. No, like I'm going to throw out a stereotype, but it's a stereotype because it's true. Most of the people in my work who work in kind of IT are generally Indians, and they generally are very good. So, bring more Indian IT guys, please.
But the thing is, it's both extremes.
Yeah.
Immigrants tend to be on the extremes.
Yeah.
Extremely highly skilled guys, and close to no skill. Well, in America, you would hear about the Mexican construction workers.
Yeah.
Here, they tend to be Polish, but it's, in the end.
Not that Polish aren't low skilled. I think it's just they're skilled in sort of a very niche area. Like they tend to be a lot of construction, is what I've seen.
So but the bottom line is immigration tends to be either on each extreme, as in very high skill or very low skill.
Yeah.
The native population is the opposite. Very few people are at either extreme. You have very few people who have no degree at all. And you also have very little people with PhDs. Most people are somewhere in the middle, have some kind of education, post-secondary education, but they are not PhDs. They're not without a degree either. So they're not necessarily competing for the same jobs to begin with. And it's actually what the studies have shown. The studies have shown that if even take like the most pessimistic studies we've seen on immigration, they show a negative impact on people who, so in America, for example, more specifically, what happened in when all the Cubans went to Miami, the negative impact were very specifically to the population without any degree, without even a high school degree at all. But across the board, and again, even the most pessimistic studies, even the most pessimistic economists who look at immigration, they will agree to say that's not negative overall. That's actually beneficial overall. There are limited in time and in scope negative effect on very specific populations.
Fringe populations, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like you said, generally either end of the spectrum. So it's generally people who are either very highly educated or very highly skilled. Okay, they're going to be competing with jobs who are with high skilled immigrants. Okay, that's kind of fine. They're very high skilled individuals already, so they're going to get by no matter what. And then the other end of the spectrum, it's people who, haven't even completed a secondary education at that point. It's people who don't have marketable skills already. So, and they're going to have a hard time of it anyway in this economy.
Yes.
In a high skill economy. So,
well, so the fun thing also is the job market is segmented. I cannot compete for your job.
That too, yeah.
And neither can you.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of the labor market economy. So that's why I say specifically people with no high school degree at all. Because let's be honest, they are easily replaceable.
Yeah. It's getting to the point where, so like that's maybe an argument for limiting some kind of low skill work in a way, or low skill immigration in a way, but but in general terms, then there is a kind of a large need for those jobs. but at the same time, they're very easily replaceable. So
maybe that's one point where you and I would disagree because low skilled immigration means essentially you get cheaper stuff.
oh, it does, yeah.
So why is it, why do we have inflation, wage inflation? It's because, the thing is, when everybody has a job already, when you are at full employment, and companies are fighting to hire someone, wages go up. Not because of better productivity, just because that's what it takes to hire someone. And so when you increase wages without increasing productivity, you have to balance that out, balance that on prices. So think of someone who makes pizzas in a cheaper, be it San Francisco or here, the productivity is roughly the same. What explains the price difference on the pizza is labor costs. So maybe some people are going to say, well, you're being a bit cynical. That's probably true, but at the same time, how do we make sure that people get that people don't see the cost of living rise? Well, I mean, if you're paying someone in Tesco $3,000 a month, which I'm not saying that's the case, right? But if tomorrow everybody in Tesco makes $3,000, your can of beans is going to be a little bit more expensive. So I know it's not necessarily a very popular point, but if you want to make sure that you get cheap stuff, at some point that means that some people are not going to be paid loads.
Yeah, well, obviously, but I'm just saying there's no need to add extra what's the word? There's no need of adding extra labor to a market which is probably already saturated in unskilled labor, like Ireland. Like everyone gets those jobs when they're young, when they're doing part-time work in college, when they're teenagers, when they're all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, people generally aren't doing that anymore, I feel, because those jobs are going to immigration, are going to immigrants, and they're generally just staying in college and stuff, and they're not building any useful skills. And I've just seen so many of my friends just go into a thing. But
I don't know if it's an economic question or
that
if
could
it's
be.
just,
That's not.
I would say maybe it's a class thing as well, or a cultural thing.
It could be just a thing where it's like people at my age now just don't get part-time jobs. They just go straight to college and then
because
go
I
into
was
a
raised.
proper job.
I was raised. I like my parents never gave me any kind of an allowance. If I wanted to get money, if I wanted to buy a cell phone, I only got a cell phone when I was 17 because I had to work to buy it. So if you're, I mean, it's a little bit of a side point, but when we live in a generation that's been called and told, oh, you can get anything you want, just buy whatever you want, and you go to college and your parents pay for every expense. What's the need for you to go and work as a barista?
That's what I'm saying. I think Irish people don't see this. I think Irish people have become accustomed to not working those kinds of jobs. Yes. I'm just speaking for Irish people in general because they feel that those jobs aren't actually well paid enough. So in a way, you're disincentivizing people from joining the workforce. That's what I'm getting at. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, which is a good thing if you think in terms of specialization. You want people with great ability to work where those abilities are better put to use. So if you work as a barista and you are someone who's really good with someone like you, really good at biology and stuff like that, it's a waste of your potential to put you as a barista.
I agree, but at the same time, I really would have loved the barista job when I was in college. It would have been really nice.
No, yeah, it's again, I know it's not necessarily.
I know what you're saying.
The point is, I'm trying to consider the fact that it's not going to be fun for you if you don't have any skill. That yes, you're going to have that competition, that foreign competition can kind of add some kind of weight to your bargaining power. That's true. At the same time, the benefit for them, because again, no one moves in Ireland unless they can make a better living here. They would just, we have a lot of Brazilians, people from Southern Europe, if they could make a better living from their home country, they would have never moved
They would have
here.
moved here, yeah.
So whatever it is that we consider here to be a shit wage, it's better than what they had.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would never have moved.
Yeah.
Unless you want to say that they're absolutely stupid. It's kind of trying to weigh the pros and cons, and the fact that for them it's better, for us it's better by providing us cheaper goods and services.
Yeah. No, I'm
Yes.
trying to get at, like, the mentality of why a lot of people are against the idea, especially maybe in the working class. You find, like, that's kind of a big kind of push that was in the UK for Brexit came from the working class. And I really do think it was because they felt like they had to compete with these extra immigrants that were coming in. So I think that was a big driving force, which is
I'd
kind
be
of
curious to
pushed
see.
UKIP and
Yeah.
Brexit.
So as we said originally, we said we were only going to talk about economics.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Because no, but here's why. Because and we'll get maybe, well, for next episode I'll do a little bit of digging, but I wouldn't be surprised that Brexit had a lot more to do with cultural questions than purely. I'll try to see if the polls were that specific in their questions, but I would be curious to see.
Yeah.
On that front.
Right. Well, next point.
Next point, yeah, you want to talk about all those entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah. Well, that is actually something. So, not only do immigrants bring skills, which is great, the high skill immigrants anyway, they also tend to bring with them innovation. So they'll take things from their own country and bring them. Yay, Chinese food, pizza. We all love these things. That they're what we crave on a Friday night after
I mean, just
work.
the fact that now Ireland has good coffee.
Yeah. Oh my God, the coffee. Thank you, Italians. But yeah, so they tend to bring over business ideas. They tend to actually start up businesses and companies at a higher rate than generally This kind of goes across the board, really, for any country. Their immigrant population tend to set up small businesses at a much higher rate than the actual, native population, which makes sense when you think about it, because they are more risk takers.
Well,
when you think
yes,
about it.
there is a selection bias.
Yeah, exactly.
Who are the people who move in a foreign country in the first place?
Yeah.
Not the most complacent ones.
Exactly. So, in that way, that's, very good. They tend to, excuse me, they tend to bring different business practices. They tend to bring innovation. They tend to
At
bring
all
good
levels,
work ethic
yeah.
as well.
Because you have...
like there's a reason there are no more Irish plumbers, or very few Irish plumbers. It's because the Polish plumbers were just a better work ethic. They had a better work ethic, and they came and they stole all their jobs.
Well, and yeah, I mean, you're
And when I
so.
say stole all their jobs, obviously I don't mean stole all their jobs, but you know what I'm saying.
I have to sing the praise of the Polish plumber. it has to be added to our folk songs in the pubs. I'll write something, whatever. I'll find some guitar arrangement and write the praise of the Polish plumbers. But so it works on multiple levels, because there is the meme in France of the kebab owner, who, yes, almost all of them are immigrants or sons of immigrants. I actually knew von Soriak, kebab owner, just in front of the place I used to work in France. The guy was actually Egyptian refugee, fled the country before it turned to complete shit. But so the thing is, so that's the local chipper.
Yeah.
And that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, if you look at big business, especially in the IT sector, there's overwhelming number of immigrants. And the reason why it's important is, let's just assume for a second that you were right about the whole job stealing. Again, just assume.
I'm not saying they're job stealing. I'm just saying they're taking.
Right.
They're occupying jobs
not
in
you
which that young
specifically.
people usually get a start on in their
Not
career.
not you specifically. Hypothetical you listener
Yeah.
who doesn't agree on.
Oh,
on-
sorry.
yeah.
Okay.
So let's agree with. They took our jobs. So we're going to consider immigrants as like a homogeneous group and say, well, as a group, they quote steal our jobs. But what happens when you have a Bill Gates in the middle of it, who's actually created thousands of jobs? So if you have an immigrant who creates a company and creates dozens of jobs, we don't really necessarily take that into account. And I believe that we should. So that's one aspect of how immigration can actually be beneficial. It's if you have someone who helps create a company that actually has dozens of jobs. Well, how do we take that into account?
Yeah, well, like just taking a personal story, like my mother's side of the family, they immigrated over here from Italy back in the 1920s, I believe. Yeah, 1920s, and set up like the first kind of Italian style chip shops in Dublin. And now there's like dozens of them, and they employ hundreds of people. So that's kind of the thing, being entrepreneurs, bringing over something that wasn't here to start with, and then setting up and innovating. And so yay for immigrants making jobs, not stealing jobs.
Yes.
So,
and there is another aspect. I would say maybe it's more Dublin specific. We hear about the problem of housing, and I would say I mean, it's one of those instances where it's you shoot yourself in the foot with a bazooka, and you blame the migrant. Because I mean, without getting too much into the details of what's happening in Dublin, yes, there is a large influx of people who came to Dublin to find work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Irish housing market wasn't, it is just dysfunctioning in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's through no fault of the migrants.
Even a small dysfunction in a housing market is like really bad, because it is a very complex product to produce. So it's usually always a few years behind, because it takes years to, build a housing complex or whatever,
Except in China.
Except in China, but they're the Chinese. They're crazy.
Hashtag not a racist.
It's like, we'll just build it here. It's fine. We don't need planning permission or to consult anyone, or it's fine. Just build it. But yeah, so there's two sides of the spectrum. There's Ireland, which is far too much regulation when it comes to building, and then there's, weirdly enough, China, which is no regulation. The government just says build it, and then they build it.
But that's how. So
China, a libertarian paradise.
Well, take Japan. Tokyo.
Japan, yeah.
Because Tokyo is a city that actually has, since the 90s, its population grow, and hasn't seen any noticeable increase in rents.
The rent in Tokyo is still insane, but compared to their population growth,
it hasn't increased noticeably over the last 2 decades. Primarily because there is very little oversight in, there is no planning, there is very little red tape or conditions to fill, you can just build. And so if you want stringent regulations on construction, you're not going to be able to have a high immigration. That's true, because you're creating a static environment. So I think that's what happened in Dublin. We said we don't want construction.
We like all the old pretty buildings. We don't want to knock anything down.
Yes, we don't want to construct.
We don't want to build any big buildings to obstruct our skyline. So
no high density housing.
We're like within walking distance of the city centre now, and we're in a 2-story house. Like in most major cities, that doesn't happen.
That just doesn't happen, or that would cost a fortune. And I think.
Well, it does cost a fortune.
Yes,
your house does cost a fortune.
It does, but but that's the point in a sense. Is how can we blame immigrants for our
failure of not building enough houses?
Yeah. So I would say on that point, the Irish National Party, the kind of new far right party that's been created, is the only party who was actually consistent, because they're saying we don't want anyone coming in Dublin because we want to preserve Dublin as a small capital, and we don't want to build higher, we don't want to build more, so we're going to cut the migrants. And I think that the left on that point is really, it's just having two positions that are self-contradictory and untenable. If you still want all those migrants to come in, you will have to lift an awful lot of regulations on housing and banking and, a lot of things that I don't think the left is really ready to commit itself to.
But they're still going to protest. Don't worry. They're going to protest about housing crisis.
Which is absolutely hilarious. I mean, now you'll always remember Claire Daly from the entire Austerity Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
One day marching in the streets saying that it's because of capitalism and evil things that rents are so expensive, and the next day in our own constituency, where is it, in Swords?
Yeah, around there.
Around Swords.
Fingal is her constituency.
Yeah, so as an elected official, blocking virtually every construction project because I quote, it's gonna reduce the property value. The same person. I'm just like, okay, well, those two positions are inconsistent. Pick one.
Yeah.
So if you're on the left, I would say, yes, it's true. If you want stringent housing regulations, that just doesn't work with high immigration.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't.
Yeah, you have to pick one or the other.
You have to pick one. And I believe that I am consistent on that because I do believe in less regulations around housing. And I also want more immigration. I do think that the National Party
he
is
wants
consistent.
to save his entire family from France.
Not necessarily. But, I mean, the National Party is consistent because they want less immigration and just as much housing regulations. I think that people who want as much regulation and as much immigration are just inconsistent. They'll have to pick one.
Cool.
But anyway, so since we're talking about those right-wing nuts, they often talk about how immigration is a burden on public funding.
Okay, so it depends, I think. It depends on the So obviously we all know that public funding is funded through taxes. Can we both agree on that?
Wait, that's not an observation of reality?
Yeah, no, that's an observation of reality. So, but a lot of people don't really like to think about it that way. They just think money just grows on trees that the government picks from their tree farm. Orchard is the correct term. But yeah, so I think what we need to understand is that an immigrant, for example, working kind of like you, for example, high school job, you pay a shit ton of taxes, okay, and you contribute a lot to generally the government coffers. So you're fairly, paying your way, I'd say, in terms of, public service wise.
If I compare what I get in terms of public services, especially
because most immigrants tend to be young as well.
Well, yeah, especially the quality of public services. I'm sorry, but your public transports. Oh my god, don't get me started.
Wait till you see our health service. I'm amazed you haven't gotten sick yet.
Well, I went to the doc once.
Yeah, private doctor. It's different.
Oh.
Yeah. No, wait. Don't go to a public doctor. Anyway, so but yeah. So in terms of like kind of for example, like you, Manny, you're a high school immigrant. You're young. You are what I would consider. I'm gonna be really racist now and say a high producing good immigrant. Okay, you're
fiscally speaking.
Fiscally speaking, you're an excellent investment to have here. Okay. I'm going to get like tarnished now for saying that people are investments, but if we're talking about immigrants, yes, it doesn't make sense to bring over an immigrant who's going to not work and going to drain money from the public coffers. So,
well, there's only so many you can have.
Well, yeah, until you have collapse,
at some point,
basically,
people start going in the street and say, hey, why is all my salary going into taxes?
Yeah.
So that's literally how you get Germany. I mean, yeah, not to Germany. It's like, hey, all my money goes to other people, and I'm like not enjoying a single cent out of it.
Yeah, and then you have people who are just gonna so just not gonna pay their taxes. So
without getting into the kind of straw man that I just drew, it's a reality we have to acknowledge. There is so much that people can tolerate.
Yeah. So like I think it just depends on like how much you're contributing to the government coffers versus how much you're taking out, kind of. Generally, because citizens themselves live here over the course of their entire lives, it kind of evens out in the end because they have their youth where they generally take a lot of money, they have their working lives where they generally contribute a lot back, and then they have their elderly retired time when they generally take a lot back. Take a lot back out of the coffers then as well. But immigrants, you find they're actually very good. They come, they work, and then a lot of them end up leaving. So
most do. So that's one of the crucial points here.
So as long as the immigrant is there and working, they're actually a really big net benefit in terms of government coffers.
Most people most
And-
immigrants retire in their home country.
Yeah, exactly. They want to go
And
home.
if you think in terms of public spending, so there are three main areas of public service. Which, where is the big burden, the big fiscal burden?
Yeah.
Education, healthcare, and pensions.
Hmm.
So when you think about it, someone who comes, a young person comes here, spend 20 years, and goes back. Not a single cent in education, not a single cent. Well, I mean, very little money in healthcare, just for maybe the occasional accident, and not a single cent in pension.
Yeah.
So that's I would say that's probably an exaggeration, but that's going to be true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I haven't costed a single cent in the Irish government in terms of education. So maybe if you're an immigrant, let's say you're an immigrant and you bring your child over for education, but okay, we can get into those specifics.
Well, can I also state, though, that is very, very rare, because most immigrants tend to come over are couples or single. So it's, generally they don't bring kids.
So they do,
But some of them do. Some of them do.
But here's the caveat. Here's the thing. If you're a child and you're raised here, and then you actually stay in the country, so I would shift a little bit the question. So the question is not what about those immigrants and their children go to school. That's not really the question, because the thing is, if you spend your scholarship here and then you work, that's going to be paid back essentially through your taxes. So that's how that public service is conceived. It's like, well, we pay for your education, and then when you're in the labor force, you're going to pay that back. So that's not a question of immigration versus non-immigration. It's a question really of, we invested money in you, and what happened next.
Mm-hmm.
I would say to a certain extent that's kind of the failure of public school is you have people who are financially able to pay for education, and we're giving them so-called free education. It's kind of its own debate, but I would point out the fact that this is not a debate we're having about food or cars or housing. We're not saying, oh, look now they're here and they take food and we can't enjoy food anymore. A lot of it has to do with, well, that's a public service, and it's taken at the expense of someone else.
Yeah, well, that's because it's a pooled kind of it's a pooled investment in a way.
It is something to watch out for. I would say the education part is overly exaggerated. If you work in the country, it's going to be paid back essentially. So the only reason that wouldn't be, quote, worth it is if you raise your kids here and then go back to your home country, which it's not what the numbers show.
No, it's very rare.
If anything, what happens is, for example, for French people go back to France when they have their second child. Statistically speaking, French couples do that. So that's not the burden. The big financial burden hasn't really kicked in yet. Mm-hmm. So if you have your children here, you're more likely to actually stay here.
Can I also point out that when you were saying about public services, actually, immigrants are also a great kind of benefit to public services, because if you look at, like, for example, at any kind of Irish hospital, I'm just taking Irish hospitals in general, most of the people working in them tend to be immigrants, because at this point, the Irish government is paying such shitty salaries for doctors and nurses that most of them end up emigrating to higher paying jobs in the States or Canada or Australia or Dubai, and what Ireland does is actually hire immigrants to come over and operate its own health service, believe it or not. So,
which does not surprise me at all. I mean, again, we're back at a point, the question of, how do we ensure cheaper stuff?
Yeah.
So that's true for medical health professionals. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that if you have, especially in a country like Ireland, who has an aging population, not as much as other countries, I would say. The
still very young. The median age here is still in the 30s.
Yes. So the situation is definitely not as bad as it can be in France. That's for sure. But the bottom line is, it is a question of how you work with an aging population.
Mm-hmm.
having people who come here and yes, provide for like cheaper nurses. Again, you can call me cynical. The bottom line is I'm quite happy to know that my taxes are not are not double what they could be if we were tomorrow saying, well, actually we're gonna pay nurses twice. That's a concern. So to know that immigrants actually lower the cost of public services by working for cheaper, and knowing that they're gonna stay here during the years when they don't consume public services because they're not sick, because they're not retired, that's a good news to me, for sure.
Right. What's our next topic to deal with then as part of this?
We've actually spent a bit more time than we thought
Oh, have
we would in this topic. I would say, how about we tune in for a bonus segment? We call it out and have a nice bonus segment on, because we wanted to talk about what we think would be interesting immigration reforms, or at least how do we cap immigration in a way that's most beneficial. Because as we said, there are marginal questions at the margin that need to be answered.
Okay.
So we invite everyone to, as usual, and subscribe and like that video and share it around. And we hope you enjoyed it.
Cool. Tune in for the bonus segment. Cheers.